everybody. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedules this evening to listen to me chat for a few minutes about harvesting rights and the traditional territory. I'm going to just touch base on a few things. A little bit about the rights, some history about the land claim, very briefly, kind of what the land looked like prior to contact. And explain a bit about what it means to be an Indigenous person and what the members of the Saugeen Ojibway Nation need to understand about rights and access to the land. So I'm going to get started here. What I'm going to do is I got a couple PowerPoint presentation slides to show everybody. And what I'm going to do is make sure this information is shared after the meeting. And people can call the office, they can look for me, they can contact me however they want to. I'm going to share a lot of information, but I just want to go through a couple things tonight just to give everybody an idea of, again, what their rights actually mean in the territory. So as we all know, before I get started on the presentations, there's been a long history of colonialism. Prior to the establishment of the Saugeen and Chippewas-Nawash unceded communities, there was just land and there was just people. That's important to understand because as a present day harvester myself, I was aware that there was a lot of restrictions on the land. There was crown land, there was private land, there was fee simple lands, there was boundaries, there was fences. What I want to illustrate tonight is the fact that our members need to understand the lands and waters as it was prior to contact. Yes, there were things surrendered in the treaties. Yes, there was things called private land, but there are other avenues and different mechanisms in place for you as a First Nations harvester to still enjoy those rights. And again, I want to be clear, our ancestors never gave up the right to be an Indigenous person. And I'll go through a little bit about what that actually means here tonight. And so having said that, what I want to do is we'll switch to the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm just going to go through that. So bear with me here because I'm going to be looking a little bit at my screen, but also trying to communicate with you folks as well. And again, by all means, as we go through this tonight, anything that I've either missed or you didn't quite catch, this is going to be aired, I believe, the following week. This information is readily available at our office. We're going to talk about what happens when you encounter law enforcement or members of the public. I'll give you real-time scenarios about that. I'll give you some information that all SON members can access going forward on kind of a statement of your rights. So, those issues that you encounter in the field or on the land or on the water, you'll have information readily available for you to go and access. So, anyways, here we go. Sorry, I'm just losing my PowerPoint screen here. Here we go. So again, this is not a presentation that is very well done. I did it today, but I just want to make sure that everybody had some references for how we're going to go about this. You might see something in here that's going to jump out that might prompt a question after the fact. And again, by all means, my information, my contact information will be shared. I can be contacted at the office. Everything that I have available to me today, each one of our members at the SON Environment Office will have this information as well. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about the land prior to settlement. What is a right? What is harvesting? Where can I harvest? Understanding natural law, and that's one thing I want to focus in on a little bit because the purpose today is to really kind of give everybody an example of where they can harvest, and I'm going to give you examples about what you can harvest. I'm going to answer questions like, what if I'm approached by law enforcement or the general public? Some safety and some best practices. In addition, with harvesting, there's always the concern for safe handling of firearms, safe handling of traps, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to make sure that if there's information about animals that may have a disease or something like ticks, we want to make sure our members are aware of all that stuff. Second here. If you could just move it to the next slide. There we go. Oh, sorry, we're just having some technical difficulties here. This is the one I want, yes. So what you see before you here is the Saugeen territory in its entirety. The light colored portion in the water is referred to as the title claim. That's something I'm not going to get heavily into, but that's again part of your traditional territory. My job today is to illustrate your traditional territory. The area highlighted in yellow is that's known as the whole Saugeen traditional territory prior to 1836. So in 1836, the Crown came to the Saugeen Ojibway and negotiated a surrender of 150,000 acres, which on the other part of the screen you can see the traditional territory subdivided by the, which is now known as Highway 21 or the half-mile strip. So there was a surrender of those lands. What's important here to understand is that yes, there was a surrender, but there was no surrender of rights. And again, that's what we're focused on today. And we'll go to the next slide. So, and again, what happened here, so in 1836, the treaty was signed for 45.5. That was a surrender of 150,000 acres with the promise that the Crown would move the Saugeen Ojibway to the peninsula and forever protect those lands reserved for the Saugeen Ojibway to hunt, harvest, practice, live their life and their children's children. So 20 years later, they came back and said that we can no longer protect you on the peninsula from squatters, and proceeded to move us to the reserves now, which we know as the Saugeen First Nation, Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. Again, that's just a really quick kind of overview of the two major treaties that we deal with in our territory. And again, the emphasis is on the land itself and the waters itself, because that's really what we're talking about today, is harvesting and how your rights interact with the lands and waters. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So this is a question that I get asked all the time. Well, what are rights? There's a couple of definitions that anyone can look up. There's a Crown definition under the Indian Act. I'm not going to get into specific definitions of that. There's the United Nations on Rights of Indigenous Peoples. What I want to challenge people on tonight is, what is your definition of a right, and what does that actually mean to you? I had to find this out by myself. There was not a lot of members of my family that didn't practice either harvesting or culture or tradition. I had to understand what that was. I knew I was an Indigenous person growing up. I learned about the Mi'kmaq out east and the Métis out west. I never learned about anything in my own traditional territory. In fact, I didn't really even know what an Ojibway was until, much later in my life. So it was an uphill battle for me trying to understand what that actually meant. Over time, I believe because I was an Indigenous person, this kind of came naturally to me. I've always had a curiosity for nature, and I started understanding the differences and the purpose of natural law. And that's what a right is to me, is understanding that natural law and how it coexists with my practices and my right to actually harvest. Harvesting quite literally means if I wanted to go and kill a deer on the land, if I wanted to go trapping, if I wanted to go harvest wood, if I wanted to go collect chert for fire or stone making, I have the ability to do that. If I wanted to harvest medicines, I'm not limited to any one of those things if I can link it to my culture. In short, in traditional territory that I showed you, you are free and capable and able to do all those things in your traditional territory. Yes, there's a lot of privately owned land. In my own personal experience, what I do is I make an agreement with the landowner. He may need some fences to be amended. He may need some landscaping. He may need something on his property that I can assist him with. I also in turn provide a service to them by letting them know if there's things out of place on their property, such as somebody else trespassing without permission. So it's a mutual benefit agreement that I have with every one of the landowners that I hunt on. So it works well for me. I don't need a firearms, I need a firearms if I'm using, a firearm. I don't carry a outdoor education license. And again, because that inherent right, I have a firearms license because it's very similar to driving a vehicle. I have to demonstrate that I've taken a course that I can efficiently drive a vehicle in a safe manner, and that I adhere to understanding that if I drive with a license, then I'm in trouble with the law. It's the same thing. Firearms are a totally different area. It's a matter of having and demonstrating that you have, proficiency in using a firearm and that you're using it in a safe manner. So for that reason, I have a firearms license. Outdoor hunting license, I do not carry, and nor do I have. And again, it's because the rights existed to harvest prior to the establishment of those laws. Can we go back to my PowerPoint just for 1 second? And I want to focus in a little bit on this. What is the definition of rights to every Indigenous person? A lot of people just harvest medicines. A lot of people maybe just hunt deer. Some people may do waterfowl hunting. Some people might just want to go on the land to do ceremony. It doesn't matter what you want to do. If it's collecting wood, if it's sustaining your livelihood, if it's sustaining your well-being, those are within your right to do so. And again, on these traditional territories. But what I want to focus in on is it's not as important to say, well, I can go kill 7 deer, or I can catch 150 fish, or I can go do this or that. It should never be about numbers. It should never be about, I'm going to say, sport hunting. The Anishinaabe way is not about how big the antlers are, or how many deer or how many ducks you can kill, or how big a turkey is. It's really about understanding the principle of natural law. And that's really about what am I doing to the land? How am I caring for that land? Because in turn, the land is actually caring for you. So that is the principle of our natural law. I ask myself the question, what do I need to live? How much do I need to live? What is my responsibility as an Anishinaabe person to the land? Does it tie into the spirituality of who I am as an Indigenous person? If I answer all those questions, yes, then I know I'm doing the right thing, because I'm not doing it for sport. I'm not doing it because I want to go kill, maybe I'll have a target of maybe 5 or 6 deer or something like that. It's our connection with the lands and the waters and our responsibilities as Indigenous people. So a right isn't just giving Doran the ability to go and harvest something. It's about the stewardship. It's the connection with the land. It's about reciprocating. I'm giving, taking. It has to work both ways with Mother Nature, and that's what's important about harvesting. And we have a lot of responsibility to the land. We call ourselves stewards. That comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. I know there are a lot of people that have expressed to me, well, I thought we're only allowed to harvest or hunt on the reserve. And again, the short answer is no. That's quite literally not what it's about. I'll show you an example of harvesting. The reason why I got into this job and the path that I ultimately took is because a lot of this starts back. I was just at a property today. Our house was built 3 years after the first treaty in 1836 was signed. And that took me back for quite a ways, because they were talking about the homestead that was built, and shortly after a dam was built right beside the property on the Sauble River. And that's a very short amount of time, because we're talking about buildings that still exist when the first settlers would have arrived. So, and again, you can imagine people were just on the land everywhere. There was no such thing as Saugeen. There was no such thing as Nawash. we are all one people. We are people on the land and to the land. So that connection is still very, very much there. As a kid, my grandfather spoke very few words, and I wanted to take 1 second to acknowledge my grandfather, Edward Franklin George, because it was some of the stories that he told me about what he endured as a First Nations harvester, to somebody that supplied for his family. He was a hunter, he was a fisherman, he trapped. He did what he could do to feed his family, and he told me countless stories where the law would try and, take his nets, take his guns. He had negative encounters with other hunters that shot his dogs, and he struggled with that, and he carried that negative weight with him for a long time, and that actually did something to me. It made me want to be somebody that wanted to change, the perception of that, and so I pursued a career in natural resources. I experienced my own type of resistance to that. I have many stories growing up as a kid where, my fishing pole or my spear or my net was taken from me. It never really stopped me. Actually, in fact, I found a lot of humor out of it, because we were quicker than the conservation officers. We were quicker than the police. We knew the land better, and it was entertaining, but quite scary at some points. And again, there's a lot of bad history about that. But it set me on a path to understand who I was, an Indigenous person. Now, my grandfather passed away the year I shot my first deer. He told me that he would take me out on the land if I had fixed up this home and became a young man and was able to sustain myself. But that triggered something in me. I maintained my position to go out, and I did, and I was successful. And from that point on, I fell in love with the idea of harvesting, because it brought something to life to me. It made me aware that the person that I had called an Indigenous person all of a sudden became alive. I was never raised in the lodge. I was never raised in the traditional teachings. In fact, where I learned a lot of my cultural and traditional teachings was on the land. And I'm very proud to say that when I harvested my first deer, there was a spiritual connection. It wasn't about how big the antlers were. It wasn't about how big the buck was. Something real happened, and it brought my soul, my spirit to life. And that's why it's important as Indigenous people that, it's not just about harvesting. My ability to go catch fish or hunt deer without a license. It's really about awakening our responsibility, our role as Indigenous people, our job to stewardship on the land. We give, we need to take, we need to give back. We need to teach our young people about the importance of respect, humility, truth, love, honesty, wisdom, all those things, those teachings that we've learned. I learned a lot of those on the land, because it's not easy taking an animal's life. In fact, there's a lot of respect that should come from that after. And those are the types of things that we need to instill in our children. Is that hunting, yes, can be enjoyable. It can be therapeutic. For me, it brought me to life. And that's such a very important thing, because that set me on my path to understand who I was as an Indigenous person. My teachings come from things like the fox and the deer and the coyote and maybe the moose and all these other things, because watching them, you see them on the land, you see them for what they are. You see them take only what they need to survive. I've seen coyotes kill a deer. It's not a pleasant thing to see, but I understood the law of nature. I understood that sometimes you have to take, but sometimes you have to give. And that's our role as Indigenous people. It's not about money. Yes, I understand that we have a commercial fishery. Those are all important. That feeds our families. But we're not sport hunters. We don't do it for the pleasure. And, if we're going to take up hunting and harvesting and doing all these things, it's not just limited to that. You can go harvest your grandfathers for a lodge. You can harvest your your material for a sweat lodge on the land. All of those things deserve the same amount of respect that you would give to a large animal that's being taken to the smallest bird, to a duck. Those are all the things that are really important to us. I want to make sure that our members understand that your rights goes probably well beyond the traditional territory. You can get permission from another traditional territory to go hunt moose, but in your own territory, you have that right to go onto your land. And if it's someone's private land, ask for permission. You can set those agreements on a mutually beneficial relationship between that landowner, and you have the opportunity to teach that person if they don't know. So yes, we have the opportunity, we have the right to harvest, but I want to look beyond the scope of just being able to say, yes, I can or can't harvest. I want to really focus on the idea of stewardship, because that's what the Saugeen Ojibway Nation Environment Office is really about. It's about preserving and protecting the rights. It's about understanding our role as stewards on the land. And this is a teaching that we need to share with all of our young people. I believe, that probably saved me from maybe going down a different path. It taught me. I remember, that first hunt that I was talking about. I remember being terrified. I was completely out of my comfort zone, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. It was dark, it was scary. I was hearing sounds that I've never heard before. Mind you, I was 15, 16 years old at the time. But I was determined, and I learned a great deal from that opportunity. Like I said, it felt like my spirit became alive after that, and things just started happening where I grew more and more fond of the woods, and I was drawn to those places because I had to go and understand all the lessons that I was learning out on the land. If I didn't get a deer, that deer taught me a lesson in humility, or maybe I was being too loud or something. There's a lesson in everything that we do on the land harvesting. You get to understand each and one of the things. I was talking to somebody that was gathering medicines. They speak to them. I heard another person say that they're constantly in prayer. They're constantly thinking good thoughts when they're harvesting. They won't go harvest deer and pick medicine and then gather firewood all in the same day. So there's a lot of sacred lessons and teachings and a lot of the things that we do as harvesters. And that's the thing, though, I think that we really forgot about, is the ability to harvest also comes with tremendous responsibility to the land. We have to understand what it is we're doing. And again, the whole principle of the 7 grandfather teachings can be applied to harvesting in many ways. And I want to give some examples too of what I encountered with other harvesters in the nation. We did come up against, and you will come up against things like this, is where there are laws that exist in Ontario for firearms, for hunting season, for waterfowl season, for turkey. There's designated seasons for all that. And it's very important to have those things, because there are a lot of Canadians, there are a lot of Ontarians that enjoy the sport of hunting. And so those things need to be regulated, and that's totally fine. And but the larger community might not know as much as you know about your rights. So this is why it's important to pay attention to things about what is my right, what are the laws that protect me, as our Anishinaabe laws, what do the treaties say, what does our leadership say, most importantly, and all those things are in place for you to observe and utilize your rights. The thing that you need to understand is, if you go harvesting in the Crown lands, you don't need permission from a landowner. You don't need to go and say, hey, Conservation Authority, can I go hunt? Hey, M&R, can I go hunt on these Crown lands? All of those lands that that I talked to you about are for you to use. And again, people that own private land, strongly encourage that you go talk to the landowner. It's been my experience many, many times. that I get permission. And some people even go as far as telling me, you don't even need to ask me because you're an Indigenous person. So by all means, go ahead. I've heard many stories when I was working for the MNRF at one point in time that older folks recall times where the Saugeen Ojibway would come in around the turn of the century, the 19th century, come into areas like Meaford, Markdale, the Beaver Valley, and they would bring 20, 30 harvesters, and they would come and they would hunt for 2 or 3 days. They would set up camp, and as soon as they were done, they would leave. That was a normal practice. So I want to make sure that our members know those same practices can still apply. But what's important is that you will encounter certain negative experiences. I can speak to a few of them. I had a gun drawn on me from a law enforcement officer, simply for the fact that the person didn't know about rights. I was harvesting with a high-powered rifle in December. The regular deer season closes at the first week of November for rifle, and that individual was aware of that, but nothing else. We have many encounters of going onto Crown lands and being threatened by general members of the public. I know I'm only one of many harvesters, but I could sit down here with 20 or 30 different people that can say they've had really negative encounters with law enforcement, conservation officers. A lot of that is changing. And if we could, I want to show you something that's going to be really valuable to our members. If we could go, I want to go back to my home screen. Yes, sorry, just to my home screen. Give me 1 second. What I'm going to show everybody is a very basic and very user-friendly tool for the members that understand where they can go. So people, I've mentioned Crown lands. And I want to show everybody a really user-friendly web app called Google Earth. Just give me 1 second here. Sorry, folks. Did you get something on your screen here? Yep. Okay, so on my computer, I have already downloaded. It's a free download. It's called Google Earth Pro. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the screen up. So it's a very easy step to follow through. You just download it onto your computer and make sure you have enough space. But what I do on the side here, can you see the screen? I can talk a little bit about this. So this is for the members that want to know where Crown land is. Like I talked about private landowner permissions, all that kind of stuff. That's very vital. I mean, I think that's very important. It's also building good relationships. So you can actually download the Google Earth Pro app. On the side, it's going to give you a list of options on the side, and it'll say add more layers. So it's basically a GIS web-based application. And on this, you can actually physically see, it's called the Parks and Recreation layer. And when you go on to Google Earth Pro, you can find that Parks and Recreation layer, and then you should have a fairly good sense of where the traditional territory is based on our maps. And then it'll highlight all the areas that are Crown managed forest, county forests, national parks, provincial parks, all those different lands, tracts of lands that are open for the public. Those are lands that you can enjoy to harvest to whatever and free without asking any permissions, et cetera. If people call the office and they're asking me where can I harvest, if they're harvesting cedar browse, if they want to harvest some firewood, if they want to do some grouse hunting or deer hunting, that's a very user-friendly, very easily accessible web app that you can download for free. And it just shows you, I use it all the time if I'm driving around, if I need to find some Crown land, say down the east part of our territory, say like the Luther Marsh or the Pretty River area, I can pull that up and it can show me exactly real time where those lands are. And again, if I want to go for a quick hunt or whatever, if say for instance, there's been a lot of hunting pressure in a certain area, then I can go to these Crown lands fairly quickly and access those lands, like I said, free and clear of any kind of, you know, maybe debates about, you know, whether I should be harvesting this time of year or not. So that's a really important piece of information that that I want to share with everyone tonight. Are we good? You can see it? Okay, I hope you guys can see this on the screen here. And again, so once you have the app downloaded, you can go, what I did is it's in the more section. So I just open this layer up here where it says more, and then see on the bottom where it says Parks Recreation Area. I click on that link, and then it gives a little check mark in a box, and now I can zoom right in. And I want to talk about Greenock Swamp here. This is a very good spot for deer hunting and a lot of waterfowl hunting. So what this is showing me is there's a lot of crown land in the Greenock Swamp area. Very good hunting. There's a lot of historical records of a lot of occupancy and usage in that area for harvesting in the past. So, and again, what this does is just shows you need to find an access point to the crown land. You can just zoom in on the layer, find a place to park. If you want to go waterfowl hunting, you can see it over here. And again, like I said, here's a classic example of a landowner that you can just ask for permission to say that you're going to harvest. And again, this is very user friendly, very easy to access. You can scroll anywhere, you can zoom out, and you can see generally all the crown lands that are really available for your use. So that's in a nutshell, that's kind of an overview of the harvesting areas in the traditional territory, and of course that includes national parks. There's a lot of provincial parks here in the North Peninsula as well. So your harvesting rights are not diminished or quashed because there's a national park or a provincial park. I want to make sure that that's clear to our members. And again, you know, for the private lands, I strongly encourage that you have that landowner and user relationship. The only time I've actually had not access to property is the fact that there are already a lot of hunters on those lands, and I generally tend to stay away from those areas anyway because it's a lot of hunting pressure. Sorry, I'm just gonna. Nope. I just want to I'm just looking at some of this other information here. So there are other forms of harvesting as well. I talked about collecting medicines. You know, it's our job at the Environment Office to map and understand where those locations are. If, of course, members want to know, we want to be able to provide that service to them. There's a lot of historical fixed cultural sites as well, like archaeology sites. Those places are open to our members to actually visit. I know some of our elders like to go there and do ceremony at those sites, whether it's a burial ground, whether it's a village site or a known ceremonial site. So your rights to access those, you know, they're also available as well. Some of the things that we do want to kind of focus in on though is understanding, you know, the Trespassing Act. I would advise not to, you know, go harvest a deer in amongst 150, 300 cattle, you know, for the safety of everyone and livestock and everything else. You know, there's responsibilities if you carry a firearm. Those should be adhered to as well. General safe hunting practices. If you're out this fall, again, if you're hunting in some of these crown lands, it is always a very smart idea to wear something high visibility like blaze orange. I think that's very important to observe, not only for yourself, but for the safety of others as well. I've encountered people not wearing, you know, safe hunting apparel. Makes me a bit nervous. Those are some general safety tips that we would provide. I also want to mention that, you know, I had a brief encounter with deer ticks are on the rise. I would advise that you would read up on that information. The Ontario Public Health has information about ticks. Just over the weekend, I encountered numerous ticks. I like to go in the bush a lot on the weekends. So things like that, information that we want to be able to convey to our members. Chronic wasting disease is a thing that is all around us in Ontario. the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry is doing an excellent job at surveillance and keeping the chronic wasting disease out of our area. It's not present in Ontario as of today. I can assure you it's all around us. We have information available at the office about chronic wasting disease, general safety tips on, when you have ticks, if a tick bites you, do I have Lyme disease or not, all that kind of stuff. Again, safe hunting practices, wearing high visibility orange, and getting out and really, to the older harvesters and to the people that don't harvest, I strongly encourage, the older ones to take our young people out onto the land and start teaching about these things that, every time you miss a deer or a rabbit, that's a lesson that can be learned. I would encourage, the people that don't harvest yet, connect with a harvester that can take you out on the land to actually teach you some of these things. It's very rewarding, and it gives you a very strong sense of purpose. And again, there's a lot of teachings behind harvesting medicine. So there's endless opportunities to get out there, and we want to be forthcoming with all this information. This is out to the general public. I just want everybody to know that very shortly, within the next week, that we will be drafting up a statement on our webpage that will talk in detail about the history of our treaties and what the rights mean, kind of a summary on what I've talked about today, and that rights are not limited to the following. There'll be a separate page about, stewardship, inherent rights, responsibility to the land. What does it mean to have a right? What's my role? What do I need to understand about natural law? Those things are going to be communicated on that page. The most important thing, though, that we're going to convey is that our office will be reaching out to the law enforcement, the OPP, and the MNRF, to brief them on what your rights are. It's important that they need to know these things. We'll be providing, I believe, little business cards that will have the traditional territory and a link to that page that specifies your right to harvest. And an official card from the Saugeen Ojibway Nation that says, yes, you are in fact a band member. Here's my rights. Here's some information that you need to know. And again, it's to reduce the amount of, I'm going to say, negative interaction. Not too long ago, there was quite a bit of that. So that's our goal, is to educate and to empower our members on every level on communication about what's happening in their territory. What are my rights? Where can I fish? Where can I harvest? What are my responsibilities as a harvester? What do I need to do to protect Mother Nature, but as well to educate everybody else in their traditional territory. So I think that's all I want to say for tonight. I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments. I don't think I've seen any come across my desk today or this evening. But by all means, feel free to give me a call at the office, 519-534-5507, or visit our website. It's SaugeenOjibwayNation.ca. Please, by all means, have an opportunity to download the Google Earth Pro app. Look for the Crown lands in your territory, and let's begin the conversation. And if there's any follow-up questions, by all means, I'd be happy to take them. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you and have a good night. Take care. Bye.